Okay, good afternoon. I hope you guys can hear me. Can I get the video spotlighted for everyone? Good. All right, so thank you so much, Reverend Fred Milligan, again from Presbyterians for Earth Care. His information, we have it, so therefore, if you need it, contact me and we'll make sure that you can get in contact with him. So at this time, we're going to have a video presentations for some of you who are online. We had some young adults join us for the summer. They were our young adult advocates. There were 5 young people. They met every Tuesday to talk about things that were impacting them as far as being advocates. And so we're going to have them do their presentation, and at the end of doing their presentation, then we will have Elder Terry say something, and then after that, we're going to have Sarita Dafferty from Freedom Agenda. She's going to do a quick update to tell us what's going on with closing Rikers, all right? So I'm going to let the young people start. Evan, you can highlight them as you have the order, okay? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eugene Park. I'm currently a junior for. Uh, uh, should I start? Okay. Hi, my name is Eugene Park. I'm a junior for Brooklyn Tech, currently majoring in the Law and Society major. And today I'll be presenting about gentrification. And I picked gentrification because of personal experiences. 2 years ago, my parents owned a store in Flatbush, but unfortunately, due to gentrification, we've had to relocate to a different store and start all over again. It was pretty difficult to relocate because it was financially struggling and emotionally. It was impactful. And I'll present my slideshow. Okay. Here are some negative effects of gentrification. So first, we have the increased cost of living, as there often is a rise in property taxes, utility bills, and the overall cost of goods and services. And due to that, displacement is often seen because residents can't afford the rising price. And as more people get displaced, the culture of the neighborhood may be eroded. And here are some effects of displacement. As people have to leave their houses due to economical problems, they often face poverty or even homelessness. And due to being in poverty or even being homeless, they often turn to crime and means to get money, and some crimes such as like selling illegal substances, burglary, and more. And LAPD Chief Michael Moore said,
Eugene, can you share it again? The slides aren't advancing for us.
oh, really?
You need to select the PowerPoint view.
Is this better?
Yeah, now it's moving. If you do it like that, that works.
Okay, sorry. Should I say this slide?
I would just continue where you are since you're only on slide 2.
Okay. So LAPD Chief Michael Moore said leaders need to focus on supportive housing rather than law enforcement. And he says these stats, these lives are speaking to mental health, substance abuse, and housing. And these are some charts I found. And in the first chart, we can see the change in median income for New York City. And in the darker shaded areas where it shows high change of income, it correlates to my second chart, where it shows the increase of homeless families. And we can see that as income rises, families who can't afford the raising prices have to experience homelessness. And here's what's being done currently. So in 2016, in order to combat gentrification, people fight for housing policies such as the mandatory inclusive housing in New York. And also in some cities, community land trusts are being seen to prevent gentrification as they acquire and hold land to ensure that land remains affordable for housing and other community needs. And there are tenant protection laws where it protects tenants from possible evictions as well as prevent them from being displaced. And here's what we can do. So first, we can spread awareness on the unfair rules. And some of these unfair rules, they block new housing opportunities, as well as rules that raise the price to build. And we can enact or strengthen rent control or rent stabilization laws to limit rent increases and protect tenant from evictions. And we can also have temporary shelters because they're essentials for immediate safety and relief for those who experience homelessness. And I believe services should be provided as well so they don't have to turn to crime. And here are my sources.
Hello, my name is Joseph Kim. I'm currently a senior at Stuyvesant High School. Next year, I hope to attend West Point and be a medical scholar. I get asked all the time if I'm up to it. The rigorous physical training, the 8-year commitment to the Army, and worst of all, no parties. Like anyone else, I was hesitant at first to pursue results in the decision to commit to USMA. However, my experience this summer assisting veterans at my local hospital was exactly what I needed to convince myself that this was the life I wanted to lead. I'm not going to front. Volunteering at the hospital got boring at times. My daily routine consisted of transporting patients and delivering the latest edition of Time magazine from room to room. Suffice it to say, it got old pretty quickly. But what made these mundane activities worth it was that I got the chance to talk to hospitalized Vietnam War veterans from all over the ward. I listened to stories ranging from heroic tales of bravery, which almost seemed too outlandish to be true, to solemn accounts of their loss from over a dozen veterans. Their stories captivated me and were without a doubt the highlight of an otherwise monotonous day. However, what truly broke my heart was that they had very few, if any, visitors. At first, I thought this was an isolated event at my local hospital, that the veterans here were just a little bit more solitary than the others. But as I looked deeper into it, I learned that this phenomenon was ubiquitous. In a 2020 survey, it was found that over half of veterans surveyed reported feeling lonely frequently. This statistic only rises as their age increases. This issue is particularly dangerous to hospitalized veterans who are more susceptible to loneliness. The U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs reports that lonely veterans are significantly more likely to suffer from depression and suicidal ideations. The worst part of that, the worst part is that veteran loneliness is not prioritized as an issue in our healthcare system, as I had seen myself. More needs to be done to help our heroes in their most vulnerable moments. One way that we can get more involved is by volunteering like I did over the summer. In 2022, over 22,000 volunteers served over 3.3 million volunteer hours. And if volunteering isn't possible, you can make a donation to the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs or reach out to your nearest Veteran Affairs Center. The most important thing to take away from this is that even the smallest bit helps. Spending just 5 minutes of your time conversing with a veteran can make their day, and hopefully yours too. Thank you.
Thank you, that was awesome.
Oh, okay. Right. Can you see the slide too? Okay.
We can see the, yes, we can now.
Okay. Sorry, it's probably loading right now.
And we get words on the screen.
Oh. Okay. But hi, my name is Yejin Sung. I'm currently a senior at Scarsdale High School. As someone who has an affinity for working with children from various backgrounds and who has an interest in law, I hope to address issues revolving juvenile delinquency. And in this presentation, I will discuss the rise in juvenile crime and the benefits and disadvantages of both rehabilitation and retribution. So while consecutive lockdowns were meant to prevent Americans from leaving their homes, you can see that the long trend of declining crime was reversed during the pandemic. And you can see in the chart that the murder rate even rose by almost 30% in 2020. So along with the rise in overall crime, we can see that violence among children has also become prevalent and continues to increase. We saw this unfortunate reversal of a decade-long decrease in juvenile crime, and murders committed by individual juveniles in the US rose by 30% from 2019 to 2020, while murders committed by multiple juveniles rose by 66%. So this drastic increase in violence and crime has been associated with a surge in gun violence, which has also been a prevalent topic in our society. Over 75% of murders committed in 2020 were committed with a firearm, and gun assaults rose by 8% from 2020 to 2021. And unfortunately, among these gun deaths were young victims who are also increasingly affected by such violence. The increasing numbers of young victims and offenders are concerning, and both are linked to this accessibility of firearms to juveniles. Gun sales skyrocketed during the pandemic, as even young children could acquire guns from family members, from social media platforms, or even buy homemade ghost guns from other children. So now I think the question becomes, how do we combat such an issue? So with society slowly returning from normalcy from COVID-19, a debate has emerged surrounding the proper ways for the government to decrease and prevent juvenile crime. So some prosecutors and law enforcement leaders have argued that more punitive approaches for juveniles are necessary, as the efforts for intervention programs have seemed unsuccessful. While others, such as advocates for juvenile delinquents, say that that this increase in adolescent violence was primarily related to these massive changes and traumas initiated by the pandemic. So now discussing kind of the history of the juvenile court, due to the constant enactment of new laws, sentences have become more punitive and juvenile court processes have become very similar to adult courts. Adolescents are increasingly becoming adults in the eye of the court. And rather than focusing on the societal failures to provide adequate support and resources for the healthy development of children, the US seems to have focused far too much on punishment rather than getting to the core of the issue. Ultimately, children are less developed than adults, and research showed that adolescents even had a poorer understanding of their rights than adult defendants, which makes it unfair for young delinquents to stand trial in an adult court. And they're also physiologically less capable than adults of thinking rationally, especially when faced with strong emotions such as anger. It is therefore important that society educate children on how to control such emotions while taking away weapons that could trigger violent actions. There's also been these increased instances of abuse and neglect in juvenile detention facilities. An example is of New York teenager Caprice McBrown, who died in late 2022 of a fentanyl overdose. And this facility was reported to have 11 other cases of maltreatment, such as physical and sexual abuse by staff. And the drugs and supposedly staff members smuggled in drugs that unfortunately the offenders, the juveniles got access to. And in another case, around 300 people sued LA County with detailed claims of sexual abuse by officers in juvenile jails, and were forced into silence with threats of punishment, such as longer stays and separation from families. So these abuses are also prevalent in adult jails, such as the jail on Rikers Island, which I believe will be discussed later in the program. I think the importance is that we must recognize the difference between punishment and restraint, as research shows that children become more violent the more severely they are punished. Restraint can come from rehabilitation, which avoids the trauma and disruptions that most juvenile offenders face when sentenced to incarceration. Children are inherently unequal to adults, and we must recognize that society influences these juvenile delinquents. And the only way to fight for justice is to get to the core of the issue by educating the youth on such matters, reducing gun accessibility, and providing effective rehabilitation programs for at-risk youth, such as through efforts such as recent Governor Hochul's recent announcement of $30 million to fight against gun violence in New York City. And ultimately, I think my research has shown that rehabilitation is likely more successful than incarceration. Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Sarah John. I'm from Fort Lee High School and I'm a junior. And the issue I'm going to be talking about today is the unfairness of the American court system. So yeah, it's shared on the screen right now, but my main point is that the United States court sentences for inmates are too long and severe according to the crimes they commit, meaning that for inmates, the sentences are disproportionate to their crimes. And as mentioned before, it's because America has sort of this mindset of retribution over rehabilitation. And when I refer to retribution, I'm referring to the fact that America has this sort of belief that punishing criminal offenders harshly in the jails and in the cells will discourage them from committing future offenses, despite the fact that according to the United States Department of Justice, this is false because criminals don't understand the sanctions for specific crimes, meaning that they're unaware of what exactly happens to them and what consequences they will face when committing a crime, and therefore retribution is not 100% effective as compared to rehabilitation, which I'm referring to providing greater support for re-entry to society for inmates, along with reducing mandatory minimum sentences because, again, the sentences are too long and severe. So if America were to emphasize rehabilitation over retribution, the inmates, when they're emancipated, they could become members of society who can freely contribute. And this is not currently being done. And it's usually nonprofits or private organizations rather than federal rehabilitation centers. And the American Public Health Association has stated that only about 11% of people that are incarcerated for addictions get treatment for it, meaning that it's very inaccessible. Which this is clearly an issue because we're not helping the people in our society that need the help the most. And these are usually people that are very vulnerable and they're facing disadvantages that obviously they can't control from some point in their lives, and they're being ignored and seen as someone other than people that we need to help. And so what can we do to help? So obviously we should advocate, we should spread the word. It's 2023, so we can use social media and we can tell people that we know in real life as well. And we can also volunteer or support rehabilitation organizations, such as in New York, there's the Hunter Doyle Clinic in Rochester, and in New York City, there's Volunteers of America in New York, which this one is a nonprofit. And the thing about nonprofit rehabilitation centers is that they usually lack funding and enough staff members. So it would be really great to help out specifically nonprofits. And of course, voting, petitioning, getting politicians who actually care about these issues and about people who really genuinely need help and they're willing to actually implement laws and bills to do something about this. That's very important as well. And educating other people. As I stated, inmates are usually not aware of the sanctions for their crimes that they commit. So even though that we should be fixing the root cause by making these rehabilitation centers more available to the people that need them and helping the recently emancipated people, we should educate because knowing the sanctions for crimes will actually deter crime instead of just retribution and punishing criminals. So educating yourself. So reading the news, which is uncomfortable, but this topic is uncomfortable, of course, to read about, but it's not uncommon, unfortunately. And so I think it's really important that we, keep up with the news and what's happening in our society. And for books, I really recommend Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, which is the book that I read. And I was personally intrigued about this topic because I read that book. So thank you.
Hi, just let me know if you can see the screen or if there are any issues. Otherwise,
We can see the screen.
Okay, great. My name is Dawn, and I am a junior at Yale studying computing and the arts. And the theme of this presentation is bridging the digital divide, empowering the incarcerated through technology. So I will be giving a very brief overview since I technically only have 2 minutes on how the current use of technology in correctional facilities neglects the incarcerated and lack of access affects their futures by hindering their access to education, employment opportunities, and essential communication channels. Wait, also, I just want to make sure you're seeing the screen you're seeing is like the big screen.
We can see the full PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, so first to talk about just existing conditions, though there have been many initiatives in the last few years to provide access to education, media, and communication, many current companies pursue a profit-oriented approach of prison technology, as with JPay and Global Tellink, or GTL. Whose predatory schemes burden families and limits incarcerated individuals' financial resources. And I think this effect was especially visible during the pandemic when communication was very precious. In addition to the phone calls and other electronic forms of communication that are monitored, companies like Text Behind and MailGuard, which are most common used in the receiving, scanning, and sending of personal mail, not only record and examine, but also yield only digital files of personal mail back to the inmates, stripping them of all personal touch, including tears, scents, photos. And I think that it's just strange that though technology has continued to advance, it's only being used to further isolate and monitor rather than being focused on further rehabilitating inmates. MailGuard in particular has a smart tracker surveillance system that gives officials a cache of intelligence into the public sender, which includes home addresses, IP addresses, email, GPS tracking, just like all sorts of information, which forces people to leave a lasting, vulnerable digital footprint for both people within and outside the walls of the prison, which can discourage, I think, communication in general. There's also an apparent need for health promoting activities, which is made possible through technology now. For example, in the forms of telehealth, which can help reduce costs, provide a real-time diagnosis from trained medical professionals, and avoid the traumatic experience of transporting inmates to hospitals. Yes. I think to talk about the technological gap, I think another pressing concern that comes from these conditions is that the technological gap that arises once the incarcerated are released back into society is, I guess, prevents them from fully integrating back into society. And despite external efforts to provide more educational programs, the fear and resistance among prison officials and the public in particular can prevent long-term implementation of technology in correctional facilities because the maintenance of such programs are largely in control of the administration there and depends solely on subjective desire to keep them in place. And because of this unfamiliarity and lack of exposure, exploring and utilizing the internet still remains a daunting task for many inmates. Many feel hesitant about approaching the unknown found in many of the digital applications needed to fully engage with today's society due to security or privacy concerns, which again make it harder for them to find jobs or even just live life. So some previous and existing solutions within the US, there's TrueLinks, which was established by the Federal Bureau of Prisons in 2015 to provide inmates with some limited computer access without having access to the internet. There's the Second Chance Pell program from the US Board of Education, also in 2015. And I think two of the more prevalent / current organizations are APDS, or American Prison Data Systems, which has been working since 2012 to help the divide, as well as the Amazon Web Services Cloud certification, which is pretty recent, but their goal is to help inmates just learn how to use computer skills and help them get jobs within Amazon after. And I think, and then international solutions that might be good examples include Belgium's Prison Cloud and Finland's Smart Prisons, which offer valuable lessons regarding the delicate line between access and security. I think it's interesting that though there have been benefits of tech training in prison already known since like 1970, not much has actually changed since then. Advocacy, I think here like again few of the organizations that people can volunteer or research or just get in contact with to help this cause. Again, ADPS, Unlock Labs, Launch Code, The Last Mile, Persevere. I think there are many college, university local programs as well, but these are some of the more prevalent ones that came up during research. But yes, thank you for listening.
Yay. Thank you.
Good job.
Hello, sisters and brothers in Christ. This is Terry Yun. On behalf of youth advocacy members and parents, I would like to express sincere gratitude to Charmaine, Elder Charmaine, Sire, for giving them full of support and love. Special thanks to Justice Ministry Chair and members. I believe we will be sharing their reports after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Sarita, you have a minute? Sarita Dafferty.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Charmaine. And I'm so glad to be able to join you all. I am with Freedom Agenda, and we organize the campaign to close Rikers, and we have been so grateful for the long, incredible support from the Justice Ministries Committee, the New York City Presbytery, and it was really great to join at the time that I did to be able to hear those incredible presentations. So thank you to all of the presenters, and I could really see all the connections with what's happening. Rikers Island really is an embodiment of all the problems that you all cited, and that's why we're working to close it. So just by ways of a bit of an update, and I know for some people are probably very familiar with our work on closing Rikers and have been engaged for a long time, and for others it may be newer, but we with the support of the Justice Ministries Committee, we've been organizing for years to close Rikers Island. Rikers Island is a 10 jail complex on toxic land it sits in the sort of in the East River in the Long Island Sound. So 90% of people being held there are awaiting trial, many people on bail that they can't afford. And it's a place that has for far too long, has undermined public safety in our city and also human rights. And we've been, our organization organizes particularly with people who've been incarcerated and whose loved ones have been or are now at Rikers Island. So people that are suffering through the conditions there now or have come out of them and are committed to ensuring that no one else has to endure that. So that's Freedom Agenda's organizing base. And then we've partnered with over 160 organizations across the city on the campaign to close Rikers and this coordinated push to eradicate what we see as this moral stain on the city. So a little bit of sort of where we're at in that. So we have a plan in place to close Rikers Island that actually mandates the closure of Rikers by 2027. And that will happen through two basic means, although there's a lot more details to share, which we would be happy to with anyone who's interested. But essentially, it is based on reducing New York City's use of jail and incarceration for all the reasons that you just heard in presentations. Our jails are functioning as improperly as places where people with mental health needs are going and aren't receiving treatment. People are there because they've been displaced from communities where gentrification has priced them out, and there's a growing number of juveniles, 18 to 25 at Rikers Island. So for all those reasons, we want to reduce the use of jail in New York City. And then for a smaller number of people, for a smaller jail population, we want to make sure that we have much improved conditions that are not in crumbling facilities on a toxic island. So that involves redeveloping some older jails that have been next to the courthouses, so not on Rikers Island, but we're also not in suitable shape for people to be housed there. So those are under redevelopment. That plan was passed in 2019, and our challenge now is getting it implemented fully and implemented on time by 2027, as I mentioned. And part of the challenge is that we have a mayoral administration that is not as supportive as the administration that was in place when the plan was passed, but we are nevertheless committed. Again, we know that this is both a moral and a legal obligation, and so in organizing with all of our partners, we will make it so that the administration has to comply. And I just want to note real quickly that this Thursday, another person died in the Rikers Island jails. His name was Manish Kunwar. He was previously in a psychiatric facility in Maryland for 5 months, and then was arrested and was extradited to New York City because he had an open warrant. And within just 7 days, he died in Rikers Island. And it's a horrible story. It's a tragedy, and it's emblematic of how Rikers is, as I said, undermining public safety and undermining human rights, and we're seeing a growing number of people with mental health needs there. So I know that you have a lot to cover today, so I just wanted to share briefly a chance to take action very briefly for those who want to we would love for you each to take like 30 seconds to click on this link and send a message to the mayor that we want him to follow through on
okay, you wanna
closing
check it
Rikers
first?
Island.
I'm not taking these two. And then I have.
And
these two.
we look forward to staying engaged with the Justice Ministries Committee. Thank you.